In Sweden, the housing crisis doesn't always look like high rent. Sometimes it looks like something worse. Time. Not weeks, not months. Years. In Stockholm, the official housing agency describes an average queue time around 9 years for a first-hand rental contract. And in the most desirable areas, the wait can stretch toward 2 decades. Think about what that means. A home isn't something you work toward, it's something you wait for. And waiting changes people. It turns adulthood into a holding pattern. It turns relationships into negotiations. It turns every plan into a question mark. Because when housing is decided by a queue, the crisis becomes invisible from the outside. The streets look calm. The buildings look fine. The country looks stable. But behind that stability is a quiet sentence. Not yet. In Sweden, a first-hand rental contract can feel like the most valuable piece of paper you'll ever touch. Not because it's glamorous, because it's secure. It means you're not at the mercy of the next landlord decision. It means you're not living on borrowed time. And once you understand how hard it is to get, you start seeing a new kind of unfairness. The system doesn't only reward money, it rewards time, not the time you spend working. The time you spend waiting. If you weren't in the queue early enough, you didn't just miss a deal, you missed years. So people adapt. They don't find a home. They patch together shelter, a sublet that can end suddenly, a room that's too small for an adult life, a temporary contract that never feels like it belongs to you. You live with your bags mentally packed, and when you live like that, your life shrinks. A loft bed isn't a trendy choice. It's how you fit adulthood into a room meant for one person. A wall desk isn't minimalist design. It's what happens when your home must also be your office, your storage, your everything. Storage walls aren't aesthetic. They are evidence. Evidence that the space isn't big enough for a normal life, so your life has to fold. These aren't solutions, they're coping. Because the alternative isn't a better apartment. The alternative is losing your address. Now the emotional reality becomes brutal. You can do everything right and still feel stuck. You can have a stable job, you can be quiet, you can be responsible, and still spend years waiting for the most basic thing, a secure home. That creates a special kind of powerlessness, because you can't hustle your way out of time. And the most unfair part is what it does to your identity. You stop thinking like a person who belongs somewhere. You start thinking like a person who is temporarily tolerated. You hesitate before you complain. You hesitate before you ask for repairs. You hesitate before you make noise. Because you don't want to be the problem. In a market where stability is scarce, silence becomes survival. So why is it like this? Not slogans, not blame, just mechanisms that stack together. First, demand concentrates where life concentrates. Jobs, universities, hospitals, and transport draw people toward the same cities. When too many people need the same streets, housing becomes a bottleneck. Second, Sweden's rent setting is unusual compared to many countries. Rents for many apartments are normally set through negotiations between landlords and tenant representatives, using a utility value principle rather than pure market bidding. That can protect existing tenants from sudden shocks, but it can also create a strange split. If the first-hand rent is relatively stable and secure, more people want it. And when more people want the same limited contracts, the queue becomes the gatekeeper. Third, new housing takes time, and planning can be slow. Even when cranes dot the skyline, the timeline still moves at the speed of permits, planning rules, and long construction cycles. So, pressure builds faster than supply can arrive. Fourth, scarcity creates a shadow life. When the official path takes years, people take whatever path exists. Sublets, short contracts, second-hand arrangements, and those arrangements do not feel like life. They feel like a countdown. Now, people ask the question every housing crisis creates: what is the government doing? There are reforms and plans aimed at boosting construction and making building easier. The government has talked about simplifying and streamlining planning and building processes, including making more construction measures exempt from building permits and simplifying requirements that affect student housing design. There are also broader reform tracks described as multi-point plans aimed at improving the efficiency of the housing sector. And on the affordability side, the government has proposed increases to housing benefits for low-income households with high housing costs, designed as support for those under the most pressure. On paper, that sounds like action. But renters do not live on paper. They live in the gap between policy and lived time. Because even if rules change, the queue does not reset. Even if benefits increase, the wait does not disappear. Even if construction speeds up, you still need a place this month. So people keep living in the meantime. And the meantime becomes a life. A series of temporary keys. A series of moving dates. A series of addresses you never fully trust. That is the quiet cruelty of a waiting list crisis. It does not just take money, it takes years. Years where you cannot settle. Years where you cannot plan. Years where you cannot fully exhale. And it creates a fear that sits under everything. What if I finally get stability and then lose it? So people cling to what they have. They do not move even when life changes. They do not switch jobs even when they want to. They do not take risks that normal life requires. Because when housing is scarce, flexibility becomes dangerous. Now, zoom out. Sweden is not alone. Across Europe, the same pressure is spreading in different forms. In some places, it is rent increases. In some places, it is bidding wars. In Sweden, it is time. A queue that can last so long it becomes part of your identity. And here is the ending that should sit heavy. When a home is something you have to wait for years, without any guarantee, what happens to the people living in the meantime? What happens to the relationships postponed? The families delayed? The lives kept on pause? Subscribe to follow this series, country by country, because this isn't one place, it's a pattern.